Thanks for coming to the session. My name is Hansen. I'm from the Richmond Fed, so therefore the usual disclaimer applies. These are my views that do not necessarily represent those of the Federal Reserve System or the Richmond Fed. So this is joint work with a bunch of co-authors. We have John Halton from MIT Sloan, Sophia Karsinek from Stanford, and Daniela Pizzello and Elise Arif from Indiana University of Bloomington. So let's get started. So the outset of this paper is that economists and policymakers often use surveys to capture unobservable expectations about future economic conditions. There's a bunch of literature that does that. There's a bunch of examples from policy work that does that. These surveys are limited. They have some limitations. They are expensive to conduct. So it means that they are not conducted that frequently, typically quarterly, often even less frequent. They often have a small cross-section, like a small panel. They have a lack of flexibility. We can't just introduce, or we can introduce new questions to the survey, but then we don't have a time series for that survey question because we cannot backtrack what the answer would have been in the past. And if we decide to remove some questions to make the survey quicker to fill out, then we're no longer going to have data for that particular question. So we don't want to make changes too often to surveys like this. They're also often anonymous to make sure that panelists submit their best forecast and don't have to worry about reputation risk or anything like that. So what we are asking in this paper is, can we use AI to address some of these limitations? And we're going to try to show you that, to some extent, it seems like we can do that. So what we're doing specifically is that we ask a large language model, we give it the Survey of Professional Forecasters survey form, we give it some data that the real world human forecasters would have available at the deadline of each survey. We give it some personal characteristics of the panelists in the actual Survey of Professional Forecasters panel. And then we ask the model, based on all this information, give us your predictions. And then we compare the LLM or AI-generated survey forecasts with the human ones. And we find that AI forecasters are fairly similar to human forecasters. They generate overall the same kinds of forecasts. They're very similar. But we also find that there are some numerical differences between the two. And to the extent that there are differences, we actually find that AI tend to be more accurate than humans. So we find that this difference is useful for policymakers and economists. One caveat to this result is that we only get this result when we are very careful in how we construct the prompt, and we make sure to include personal characteristics, past forecasts from the survey, real-time data. All of these data points are super important for the ability of the model to produce forecasts that look like human forecasts. So we need human oversight, we need human input. So the overall conclusion is, we can augment human surveys using AI. We cannot substitute humans using AI. So basically, it's consistent with, I think, many of the papers out there on applications of LLMs. Okay, so this idea is not coming out of nowhere. We are building on, at this point, quite a few papers that show that large language models might be able to simulate humans and human reasoning, so that LLMs might be human enough for these kind of purposes. There is also literature emphasizing the importance of including personal characteristics in the prompt when doing this. It's important to say in the prompt, you are a forecaster on the panel of Survey of Professional Forecasters, you have these characteristics and so on. So we're using those findings heavily in this paper as well. Okay, so with that, let's dig in. So why do we use the SPF, the Survey of Professional Forecasters? Well, for a bunch of reasons. First, it's widely used by policymakers. It's, for instance, in the Federal Reserve Teal book. It's also widely used by economic researchers. So this is a survey that has a lot of interest in the literature. It's also the oldest quarterly survey of macroeconomic expectations in the US. It was started in 1968 and it's been conducted by the Philly Fed since the 1990, which is also where we will start our sample. So we have a long time series of data. It is subject to limitations that I was talked about earlier. It's conducted quarterly. It only has 40 panelists in the cross-section, and these are rotating panelists, rotating in and out. Another important aspect of this survey is that it's professional forecasters. So these people are not households or like your normal US consumer. These are people working in forecasting firms, economic consultancies, even academia. So that sets a high bar for large language models to clear. And finally, panelists are anonymous. So this means that the answers from each survey participant are not in the training data of the large language model. This is important for temporal leakage concerns. It also means that if we can match the individual level forecast with LLMs, then we are able to say stuff about how does characteristics of the forecasters affect their forecasts. Okay, with this point, I'm making it very clear that we need these personal characteristics to simulate the survey. How do we do that when they're anonymous? So it turns out at the very end of each published survey, the Philly Fed is acknowledging the people who contributed to the survey. And this is what the acknowledgement looked like. So it has the names and the affiliations. And it turns out that this acknowledgement covers a lot of the people participating on the survey. So what we do is we take this for each survey in the sample from 1990, so 100 surveys. We take this, we stalk these people online, we find their personal websites, their LinkedIn profiles, obituaries in certain cases. And we do that to extract their personal characteristics. So for most of them, we have gender, cohort, country of origin, social media presence, education level, what field the education is in, and where they got the education from. We have the job title, the type of work and the type of work they do, and the location of the affiliated organization. So in the paper, we have time series plots of these characteristics through time. How does the composition of the panel of the SPF looks like? I'm not going to show you that because I don't have a lot of time. So how do we use all this to simulate the SPF with LLMs? So the SPF has a lot of different forecasts. We are focusing on a rather large subset of this, which is all the point forecasts. So there are 23 point forecasts distributed across different variables. We forecast over 5 horizons, which is the nowcast, so the current quarter, 1 quarter ahead, 2 quarters ahead, up to 4 quarters ahead. And our sample is from 1990, I don't know why it says 99, to 2023, plus an out-of-sample validation for 2024. We use GPT-4 Mini with temperature 1. We have a bunch of robustness checks with other kinds of models. GPT 3.5 is not as good. GPT-4 is as good, so therefore we went with the cheaper model. Llama and DeepSeek are generally really good as well. That's surprising. Okay, so I already talked about this a little bit. It is still a concern. Is the model just looking into its training data to produce forecasts, especially when claiming that these models are more accurate? We do a couple of things in the prompt to avoid this concern. Let's try to mitigate it. We are saying strictly do not use information beyond the survey deadline. And we're also providing real-time macroeconomic data at the vintage that was available to the human forecasters at the deadline of each survey. It could still be a concern though, and to address that, we do two tests. One is that we test the out-of-sample performance. So we do this exercise only for 2024, which is after the training data cutoff. This is very few 1 year, quarterly observations is four test points. We can't really conduct inference, but it looks like we get similar results. We also try to do a test where we basically are doing a recall. Instead of saying forecast these variables based on this data, we are saying recall what the value of this series or this variable was on this state. And we find that the model is not able to do that well at all. Okay, I think I have time, 5 minutes left, is that true? Okay, so there's a lot of results. We have 23 variables over 5 horizons for 100 quarters. I'm not going to show you everything. Here we are focusing on 4 variables that are important for policy. These are not cherry-picked, and all the results are in the paper. I only have a couple of minutes to go through this, so I won't make it through everything. So let me just give you the 3 main takeaways. One is that AI is pretty similar to the human forecasts. The second is, to the extent that there are differences, AI tends to have a better forecasting accuracy. And the third is that only when properly prompting these models with human input. Okay, so let's see how many results we can make it through. So this is showing the median forecast of 1 quarter ahead and 4 quarters ahead of CPI inflation rate. Human is the gray sort of fat line. AI is the thin black line. This is the variable among my 4 that has most differences between AI and humans. So AI has a lot more quarter-on-quarter fluctuations. It's a lot more reactive. But on average, these are fairly similar. A t-test does not find that there's statistically significant median values. This is the same picture for the 3-month Treasury bill rate, so a lot more similarity. One thing I find really funny is that during the zero-low bound, humans keep predicting that we'll have a lift-off from the zero-low bound, because that's past experience is saying we cannot have rates stuck at the lower bound for this long. Models of the term structure would also mix these kind of predictions, but AI is saying, no, we can have it at the zero-low bound. Why not? This is unemployment rate, very similar, and the same for real GDP. So that was just the median. We can also look at the entire distributions. We cannot match individual level forecasts, so what we're doing is to look at unconditional distributions. This table is showing differences between AI and human for different moments of the distribution. Stars indicate if the difference is statistically significant from 0 using randomization tests. So what we see is that there's a lot of stars in this table. It looks like there's a lot of differences here, but a lot of the differences are not economically significant. We have a 10 basis point difference for the Treasury bill rate, a 30 basis point difference for CPI inflation rate. I have a lot more to show you, which I won't have time to. There's some density plots for each quarter. I'm not showing 100 of these, I'm showing 4 for each of the variables. We have some tests showing that that AI tends to agree more than human forecasters do, which makes sense. And then we have some results showing that AI tends to be more accurate, but only when providing information from humans in the prompt. So I've been told to wrap it up, so I'll do that. Our findings suggest that LLMs can augment humans in economic surveys. And this has a lot of implications. It means that we can use AI to augment our methods to collect surveys. We can experiment with these AI-generated surveys and learn a lot more about expectations from each. Thank you.
Maybe you have 4 minutes for questions.
Yeah.
Do you have any observations like where AI underperform humans, and then you can see why?
There are cases where AI underperform humans. Typically, we find that longer forecasting horizons, AI more often tend to be better than humans, with a few exceptions. Shorter forecasting horizons, humans tend to be better. Sorry, there are fewer cases where For shorter forecasting horizons, we still find that AI outperform humans, but with more cases where humans are outperforming.
So maybe the economy is going up versus going down has some kind of differences over there.
Our interpretation of it is that humans are better at. Humans make forecasts based on data, but they also make forecasts based on intuition and a gut feeling. And those kind of elements are more important for short-term forecasts, whereas longer-term forecasts might be. It's harder to predict. So being good at processing data, which LLMs are, is probably a benefit.
Yeah, I was thinking of the humans more sentimental, more emotional attached because they have a personal stake in the macroeconomy. Maybe they're like when the economy goes up, they're more optimistic over the excited. Exuberance maybe it will be exercise over there, but is that in your data versus AI?
I guess a test of that would be. So we did try to slice and dice the data in all kinds of ways according to level of uncertainty in the economy, crisis, non-crisis. We tried a bunch of different ways, and there's no patterns as to when humans are better than AI or AI is better than humans. So basically, we don't know. Yes. Yeah.
So how are you correcting or sort of taking into account the fact that the large language models have seen the future? I mean, they already know what has happened, and there's a ton of data on this, right?
Yeah.
In its training data. So, what kind of corrections have you made to it? I mean, because some of the accuracy could potentially be explained by the fact that, well, okay, like despite the prompting, the known future is actually in its training parameters.
Yeah.
So
it's a totally valid point, and we can't really get around that. We are not doing any adjustments. What we are doing is to test what does the results look like in 2024 when we don't have this problem because the training data cuts in October 23, and that looks promising. And then we also did this recall test to try to see can they recall the values if we are asking for it, and it looks like it's not really good at doing that. That is not the same as saying that they are not looking at the data when forecasting, but it's an indication, and it's the best that we can do.
Do you see a performance drop-off when you cross the date cutoff?
I'm sorry?
You said you checked the performance before and after the cutoff.
Yeah.
Do you see a big drop-off in performance, or is it not significantly different?
I need to make that plot. I believe we don't, but I haven't actually made the plot. So thank you.
You crawl the public social media data to try to simulate the persona of those forecasters, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Does those characteristics matter? For instance, versus you don't try to simulate the persona, gender-wise.
Yeah. So we find that including all the personas versus not including personas at all, on average, we improve, the forecast accuracy improves 7%. So it does matter. For some reason, it's hard to establish statistical significance of that difference, but I think it is a significant economic significance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.